A ship and a crew are all I want. As soon as I set foot on that deck, I'll have a ship. And as soon as I can raise the Barachans, I'll have a crew. The lads of the Red Brotherhood are eager to ship with me, because I have always led them to rare loot. And as soon as I've set you and the girl ashore on the Zingaran coast, I'll show the dogs some looting. Nay, no thanks. What are a handful of gems to me, when all the loot of the southern seas will be mine for the grasping? In previous videos, we have discussed how not all of Robert E. Howard's Conan stories are the same. Now, as always, cultural perceptions of Conan the Barbarian are very inaccurate. This is because of all the different adaptations and parodies and things that have come out over the years that make it seem as though Conan is a static character, that all the stories are the same thing over and over again. And if you read some of the pastiches and maybe some of the comics over the years, you might occasionally get this impression. But if you read Robert E. Howard's stories, you would realize that this could not be further from the truth. Robert E. Howard's Conan stories have a wide diversity in storytelling, from adventurous exploration stories like Jewels of Gwalar or Red Nails, to murder mysteries like The God and the Bull, to a very strange feeling, almost slightly psychedelic seeming The Frost Giant's Daughter. The subject of this video is no exception to this rule, and in fact, I think this might be one of the strangest of the Conan stories, yet it's a damn good one. And that is, of course, The Black Stranger. Often people cite the story Beyond the Black River as one of their favorite Conan stories. I like that story a lot, but it's never been in my top favorites, and I actually would have to say I prefer The Black Stranger over that one. Now, I understand the reasons why people like Beyond the Black River, and completely valid. It's just so happens that personally, there are different things that I'm looking for when I read a Conan story that make it interesting to me. So for me, The Black Stranger was more interesting. Now, before people get up in arms by the title, I do want to address that I think there is some possibility that maybe this is one of the stories that started some of the ideas of Robert E. Howard being a racist because of a couple specific lines. Obviously, a lot of that idea also comes from some of the things he's written in personal letters and stuff, but we've addressed that a bunch in other videos, and I will continue to defend Robert E. Howard. I do not believe he was a racist, but there is this part in the story where these two characters essentially there's a vast group of Picts that are out attacking them, and these two characters essentially say, well, Conan will keep his word. He's not going to let people of the same race be attacked and killed by people of another race. I could see how someone would read this and think that Robert E. Howard is a racist. However, I do want to point out that this is not Conan saying that. This is another character saying that about Conan. The character saying it is also a very dishonest, distrustful character. Now, Conan does mention how there's been a long-standing feud between Cimmerians and Picts. There is definitely a racial rivalry there, but this is not something that just equally means, oh, the author is racist. If we look into real-world history, there are racial feuds all over the entire world, some that still go on today. This is just reality. If we are to shy away from all of these ideas in our writing out of fear of being perceived as racist, I mean, it's silly. Robert E. Howard was very interested in including historical ideas into his fictional stories, and so it just makes sense that something like this would also be included. The rivalry between the Cimmerians and the Picts makes perfect sense. Now, of course, the race of the characters who said this and the race of Conan are actually different because Conan's a Cimmerian and they're not, but what they are saying is white skin. We have to understand that prejudice is a real thing. Okay? And for all of human history, people have developed prejudices in different ways, whether it be a racial prejudice or a religious prejudice. It doesn't matter. This is just a reality of the world. Robert E. Howard is creating more realistic fictional stories by including things like this in the story, and it creates a deeper and richer narrative as well. In the modern writing world, people are so afraid to touch on any of these topics that they're risking their potential for immersion and realistic relatability in their stories. But that aside, what is the Black Stranger? So this story takes place right around the same sort of time as Beyond the Black River. In fact, a lot of the things in the Beyond the Black River are mentioned in the story. For example, the Aquilonian outpost that is close to the Black River that ends up getting attacked by Picts in Beyond the Black River, those outposts are mentioned in this story. And I believe this one might be slightly later in the timeline than Beyond the Black River, but obviously with the Robert E. Howard's Conan stories, it can be difficult to place them exactly on a timeline. But this is definitely later in Conan's life. He is very experienced, he understands the ways of the world. He's very competent at this point, very intelligent, but obviously before he's become the king of Aquilonia.
Just to be clear, and this should be expected with a video like this, there will definitely be spoilers in this video. I will be summarizing the whole story.
This is a pirate story, and it very much feels, it has a lot of the sort of tropes of a stereotypical pirate story, but also with a lot of things that are not normal for your typical pirate story. So it's really interesting. But we see several different pirate captains, doing a sort of standoff-like situation where they're going at each other, and alliances and trust are, every other chapter, it seems like we have a new sort of alliance formed and then a backstabbing or a double crossing or something. So it's really a fun story. Now, one of the most interesting things about this story is that there's a large portion of it where Conan is not even present in the story. And it actually starts out with Conan, that's who we're introduced to at the beginning of the story in the first chapter, being chased by a band of Picts hundreds of miles through the forest. Conan eventually finds a crag, and he's been quite injured at this point, shot by arrows and just in rough shape. And he's ready to make his last stand. He's pretty sure he's gonna die. So he climbs up this crag and takes refuge up there. And he watches as the Picts approach, see him up there, and then they put away their bows and arrows, and they turn and they walk away and they just leave. And because he has such an understanding of the Picts and their culture and everything, he knows that they're not coming back. So he's quite perplexed by this, and he's like, he knows that there's like places that the Picts deem as sacred, but he thinks there's no way that this particular group of Picts sees this as a sacred place when it's 100 miles away from their area. So he gets up and goes to kind of look around and investigate, and stumbles upon a bunch of chests and a little door that is closed off, a little hideout area. This is interesting. He opens the door and starts to peek inside, and he sees people all sitting around a table, recognizing one of them as this particular person, but they're not moving. They're just completely still. And he realizes that they're actually dead, but their bodies have been preserved in this weird way, to the point where one of them is still holding a glass of wine and the wine is still in there. But then as Conan crosses the threshold of the doorway entering in, he sees this smoke in the air and starts to feel it choking him. And this is kind of when the chapter cuts. So we don't know what happens to Conan, as the next chapter we are introduced to new characters, and we don't even see Conan again in the story for quite a while. So it's at chapter 2 that we are introduced to a woman named Balessa, and she's sitting along a beach when another young girl approaches named Tina. Now, Tina's a young girl, and I don't quite recall if Tina is Balessa's daughter. I don't think she is, but because of events that happened leading to this point, Balessa essentially acts as her mother. Now, while they're over here on the beach, Tina sees a sail out in the ocean approaching into the little harbor area where they're at. Balessa says, we have to go and tell the count. So they run back to the fortress, and this is when we start to come to learn what exactly is happening in this story. So there's a little fort where these people from Zingaran have built this fort and are taking refuge inside it, and they've basically been stranded here. They were sent to this place for kind of an unknown reason, and their ship was destroyed as they got there. As a result, they had to make the most of their situation and just take refuge here and essentially live out their lives there until maybe this person that sent them there was allegedly going to be coming back or something to get them. There's this guy named Count Valenzo, who, if I'm not mistaken, is Balessa's uncle, I believe. And he's who's basically in charge of this little fort. Now, over time, they have had to deal with the Picts over and over again, coming out of the forest, having to defend themselves against them. But now they see this ship approaching into the harbor. The ship pulls up and, docks by the beach, and people come out of the ship and start approaching the fort, and one man walks up to the fort to speak to Valenzo. This man is none other than Strom. For those of you who have played the MMO Age of Conan, you remember Strom from the tutorial area on Tortage. He was sort of the big boss of this whole part of the game. Now, Strom is part of the Red Brotherhood, which is, of course, the same Red Brotherhood that we know because of Valeria from Red Nails. Strom sends his men charging at the fort, trying to break in, and the people inside the fort do their best to hold them off. But all of a sudden, the pirates, pack up and retreat and go back to their ship and sail off further into the little inland river thing. And that is because they spotted yet another ship approaching. So the Count orders his men to go out and destroy the mantlets and the sort of things that they're trying to use to siege the fort before this new ship gets there and all of its men try to do the same thing. A very similar sort of scenario plays out where these new strangers show up and they come out of the ship heading up to the fort, and a man walks up and there's an exchange between him and the Count, and we learn that this is a man named Zerono, who is the captain of a different pirate ship. We sort of learn that Zerono and Strom have been going at it back and forth, both looking for this particular treasure. And Zerono tries to work out a deal with Count Valenzo to allow him to come into the fort so that they can discuss a possible exchange. They would work together to fight off Strom, and in return, Zerono would take Valenzo and maybe a handful of others from the fort back to Zingaran. Now, of course, during this exchange, Zerono makes his interest in the Count's niece, Balessa, very clear, and he proposes that as part of the exchange, he would get to take Balessa as his wife. Balessa is outraged by this and jumps up, and she's not liking it one bit. Now, as they're sitting there at the table having this discussion, Tina, the young girl, shows up holding this little piece of jewelry that was given to her by Balessa. It's like her most treasured possession. She had actually left the fort to go back to the beach to find it where she thought she had lost it. Of course, she's scared, like, I'm sorry, I know I shouldn't have gone. Tells Balessa to punish her because she did the wrong thing by going out of the fort on her own. But that is when she says, I saw a black man in the distance. She tells this to the Count. A black man, my lord, she stammered. When I went down to the pool to get my necklace, I saw him. There was a strange moaning in the wind, and the sea whimpered like a thing in fear. And then he came. I was afraid, and hid behind a little ridge of sand. He came from the sea in a strange black boat, with blue fire playing all about it. But there was no torch. He drew his boat up on the sands below the south point and strode toward the forest, looking like a giant in the fog. And Count Valenzo goes wild hearing this, accusing Tina of lying. And he makes one of his servants basically rip off her shirt, and he starts whipping her. Of course, Balessa is, freaking out because this is her one thing that she has to love and cherish in this new area that they have been forced to live in. Tina is her everything. And here is her uncle all of a sudden possessed with rage and whipping this young girl brutally, simply for just saying what she saw. But the Count swears, you're lying, you're lying. And we sort of realize that the Count is terrified. Now, earlier in the story, Tina mentioned something to Balessa about the Count being scared of somebody and running from somebody, asking, is that why we came here? And Balessa doesn't really know what she's talking about. But here in this moment, Balesa can tell that Tina is telling the truth of what she saw, even though the Count is punishing her for allegedly lying. But what we can tell from the subtext here is that the Count doesn't necessarily think she's lying. It's more so that his greatest fear is coming to haunt him, and he's taking his rage and fear out on Tina. This drives a wedge between Balesa and her uncle. And of course, just before this happened, he promised to Zerono that he would give her to him as his wife. So plenty of things to piss her off. Now they go up to the room, Balesa and Tina, and while they're in there sleeping, like Tina starts kind of freaking out, and there's something out in the hallway, they can tell, and Balesa walks up to the door and she can sense it too. There's something out there. And Tina swears it's the black man. Now, some clarification here. The way that Tina describes the black man is black like a Cushite, but what we know from the descriptions in the story is that's not really what we're looking at here. It's not black as in black skin, even though that's how Tina describes him. It's actually like something more akin to Father from Codename Kids Next Door, like an all-black silhouette type of a stranger with blue flames. That's at least what I gathered from the descriptions. Now, eventually, Strom shows back up, and he decides to try and make a deal as well. But now Zerono is already inside with Count Valeso, and Zerono starts to sort of take charge. They're setting up a defense against Strom, and he does a lot of the talking when Strom shows up. Strom says, "I've come to make a trade." And Zerono says, "We've not to trade with you save sword strokes." Strom says, "I think otherwise. You tipped your hand when you murdered Galacus, my first mate, and robbed him. Until this morning, I supposed that Valenzo had Tranicos' treasure. But if either of you had it, you wouldn't have gone to the trouble of following me and killing my mate to get the map." So this is when we learn that one of Strom's crewmen has been murdered, and the map that the crewman was carrying to the treasure has been stolen. He's, of course, certain that it's Strom and Zerono, but Strom and Zerono know that they don't have the map. Zerono, of course, sees this as an opportunity to pretend as if they do have the map to try and work out some sort of a deal with Strom, because a storm did come and Zerono's ship was also destroyed, and now they're both stranded there. So now they need to work out a deal with Strom to try and, for both of them, Count Valenzo and Zerono, to get off of this area. So they let Strom in and they start trying to work out a deal. Everyone is sort of in their mind trying to double cross each other, and that is when none other than Conan shows up inside the fortress, inside the palisades, and just casually strolls in holding the map. And this is I love this about Conan so much. There's so many times when he just casually shows up in the middle of something like going on someone else's affairs, and instantly he is in charge of the situation. He is in command of the whole room. Everyone just knows it. Conan's holding the map, and they're all like, "Oh, the map." And he throws it into the fire, and it burns. And they start freaking out, and he says, "I already know where the treasure is." So now he holds the cards. The only way for them to get to the treasure is through him. So up until this point, Conan was not even in the story except for that first chapter. Now he is a highlight of the story at this point once he shows up. He's working out a deal with the pirates to go with him to go and get the treasure, and together they will be able to carry it back to the ship and then divide it among them equally. But once again, all of them, including Conan, are plotting in their heads how they're gonna flip this in their favor. Now, as Balesa and Tina are watching this whole exchange, it's interesting to see their sort of what they're thinking. They don't trust any of these men, yet something within them makes them feel that they can trust Conan. It's just something about the way Conan is, the stories and legends of him that people have heard. Whatever it is, they feel like Conan is the only one who they can trust. These other men are civilized men, yet they have no moral code. But Conan, although being a barbarian, he has this sort of primitive sense of justice and honor, and he has a moral code. Now, at this point, Conan and the two pirates with their crews. Sorry, guys. I've been trying to get a job before I graduate college, and so I had a phone interview the other day, and they wanted to get me in for an in-person interview, and that I had just, in the middle of shooting, I got a phone call about that, so I had to take it. Now I got to try to remember where I was. But I think the last thing I was talking about was how Conan and the two pirates headed out to go to the treasure. Now, when this happens, Conan's going to take them up the crag to the little hideout where the treasure's at, but of course the two captains are like, well, we need a guy to go with us, one of our guys, in case you tried to double cross us. And Conan says, fine, whatever. So they get up there, he shows them the chests, and then the door to the hideout is open, which it wasn't supposed to be, So he's like, and he shows them that the valuable jewels are inside the hideout, and they peek in, they're looking, and they see the smoke and stuff, and he tries to shove them in so that he can shut the door and keep them in there so they'll get killed by the smoke. But it doesn't work quite the way he wants, and they don't stumble all the way in, so then he has to fight them. So a little scuffle happens, and eventually he retreats and climbs further up the crag, and that's when the two captains are yelling up at him, and he's like, well, you still need me, you still can't survive on your own, you're not going to be able to get back there. And he says, but I'll just kill you, Conan eventually says, forget the treasure, let's just get out of here because the Picts are coming. So they start running back to the fort and trying to get there. It's a long journey, but Conan leads the way. And eventually they do make it back to the fort, but the Picts show up, and there's this long battle between the Picts where the Picts actually get into the fort, and they're all fighting, and lots of people dying and whatnot. But eventually, after this is mostly reaching its end, inside the little fort, the black stranger shows up with the blue fire. And Conan's like, my sword is not going to be able to kill this thing. But he sees a silver bench that comes from the place in Zingara where the Count is from. And then there's a fire, and he thinks silver and fire, that will stop this demon or whatever it is. So he throws the silver bench at the thing and sends him sprawling into the fire. And at this point, Conan, he ends up taking Balessa and Tina and saving them. Part of him going back there in the first place was because he thought of them. Oh, those two girls are there. They need help. So he saves them. And this is when we get to see a side of Conan's sense of justice and morality. He's a little morally gray, but he does have this moral code that he abides by. He felt that he needed to save these two. So he gets them, he escapes with them, and then he's going to take them on Strom's ship back to Zingara, and he gives them some little jewels that he had in his breast, in his shirt. And they say, don't you want these? This is valuable. And he's like, no, you're gonna need them if you're in Zingara. You're gonna need them to survive. And they said, don't you want them? And he said, I have all the plunder in the world will be mine. Something along those lines, that quote that I read at the beginning. So that's the general summary of The Black Stranger. It really is a great story, and I actually think it's better than Beyond the Black River, personally. I know others might not agree because they really love Beyond the Black River, but this one is very good. And like I said, it shows the wide range in Robert E. Howard's writing. It's not all the same story. In this story, we get chapters and chapters without Conan even being present, which is kind of surprising and interesting. Yet the story being told was still so good and interesting that I wasn't bothered by the fact that Conan wasn't there yet. I was curious as to what happened to him after that first chapter the whole time, but it was very good. I also like that the supernatural element of the Black Stranger, the man with the blue flame, the demon thing. I thought that was really interesting. And the part where Tina sees him up in the distance was genuinely kind of frightening. Definitely added a lot of suspense to the story. There's so much going on in this story between the plotting and the backstabbing of the different pirate captains and the Count and Conan.
And looming over all of this is the threat of this black stranger that the Count has been fleeing from this whole time. Of course, they do eventually find the Count hanging from a noose, and I don't know. The way I put this together was he unalived himself out of fear of the black stranger coming to get him. He figured it was best that he just did it himself. And that's basically the story. So this is the third time that I've done one of these story summary videos. We'll see how well these do. I'm not entirely sure because the second one I recorded has not come out yet. The Rogues in the House one, that has not come, the God in the Bowl story. That has not come out yet at this very time that I'm recording this video. I pre-record these and then I schedule them for upload down the road. So we'll see how well these do. If they're performing well, I will do more of them for the other stories. But we'll just see how it goes. That's pretty much what I've got. Hopefully I didn't get too derailed by that phone call in the middle of the video, but that was a little jarring for me as I was trying to record a video. If you guys are not subscribed yet, but you're fans of Conan the Barbarian, by Crom, slam that subscribe button because I've got new Conan videos coming out every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at noon Central Time. Also, you can click the link in the description below to head on over to Amazon where you can get a copy of my sword and sorcery novel, Wrath of Torak. And I also want to thank Tocado Adventurio. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right because I don't speak Portuguese, but thank you for having me on your show. Maybe I'll put that link to that in the description below as well because that was a really fun interview that he did. We filmed this probably like a month ago, but it just released today as I'm recording this video. So thank you so much. Big shout out to my patrons. Thank you, Nate, Austin Brown, Aaron, Frog Morton, and James Mills. If you guys want shout outs in these videos, you can click the link in the description below to head on over to my Patreon. And if you're looking for your next video to watch, if you liked this one and the format of it, the summary of a Conan story, because I know not everyone has the time to go and read these stories, I would highly advise you watch this one right here, which is me summarizing Red Nails, which is my favorite Conan story. So definitely go and check that one out.